And I give now the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we thank you for convening this resumed 10th Emergency Special Session of the General Assembly in response to the requests of the Arab and the Organization of Islamic Conference groups and the non-aligned movement. My delegation aligns itself with the statements made by the OIC and the non-aligned movement. Mr. President, for over 400 days, the world has witnessed the indiscriminate slaughter of the Palestinian population of Gaza. 44,000, mostly women and children, have been killed. Over 100,000 injured. The UN Secretary General has said, and I quote, "What we are seeing may well amount to the gravest international crimes," unquote. The heads of 15 UN and other humanitarian organizations have said, I quote, "The situation unfolding in North Gaza is apocalyptic. The entire Palestinian population there is at imminent risk of dying from disease, famine, and violence." Pakistan welcomes the ceasefire in Lebanon, although Israel continues to violate it at will. But the slaughter continues in Gaza, as do strikes in Syria. And the war continues to loom large over the entire Middle East. Mr. President, while we acknowledge the mediatory efforts made by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, we must express our deep dismay that on 20th November, the resolution calling for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, sponsored by the elected members of the Council and supported by 14 of its members, could not be adopted due to the veto exercised by one permanent member. Mr. President, there is no rationale that can justify blocking a decision designed to stop the slaughter of helpless civilian populations. The General Assembly must now exercise its responsibility in accordance with the Charter to demand an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and the implementation of the several resolutions adopted on this conflict by the Security Council and the General Assembly, as well as the adjudication by the International Court of Justice. We also support the establishment of an international accountability mechanism to take cognizance of and punish the war crimes and crimes against humanity committed and determine the reparations for these crimes. Mr. President, similarly, we must uphold the mandate of UNRWA and condemn and reject Israel's efforts to halt its operations. UNRWA is the only organization capable of assuring humanitarian assistance and relief to the besieged Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and elsewhere. Pakistan, therefore, welcomes the two resolutions to be submitted by the State of Palestine for adoption by this emergency session. Mr. President, this Assembly and the world community must also look to the future, to the grave consequences of this Israeli war. Israel's war has demonstrated that aggression and genocide can be committed against some peoples with impunity. Indeed, with the complicity of those who vocally uphold the rule of law and human rights in almost every other geographical and political context. Such impunity has contributed to the ongoing destruction of the foundations of the world order which we created almost 80 years ago. Are the memories of those who fought fascism and racism, of those who suffered the Holocaust, so short that they can justify and perpetrate this 21st century slaughter against the helpless Palestinian people? The genocidal actions of the Israeli war machine should be unacceptable to any individual, society, or state which values the principles of the UN Charter, which values peace, which values human life, which cannot countenance the massacre of innocent children and women. Mr. President, we must ask ourselves, what is the reality that we are creating and leaving behind in the Middle East in the wake of this war? We have today an Israeli leadership which has proclaimed its dark vision of continued slaughter in Gaza and its continued occupation. A vision of the expulsion and extinction of the population of Gaza through violence and starvation, of the annexation of the West Bank by aggressive Israeli soldiers, helped by settlers, unleashed against an unarmed Palestinian population. A vision of the outright rejection of the two-state solution and the extinction of the right of self-determination of the Palestinian people. Mr. President, this dark vision will have its repercussions, especially in the Arab and Muslim world. The people of the Islamic world will not forget or forgive Israel's crimes. Popular resistance to Israeli occupation will not end. It will intensify. A peaceful resolution of the Middle East conflicts will become more difficult. Mr. President, it is therefore imperative for the international community, for this General Assembly, to consider the steps needed to prevent the realization of the dark vision that Israeli extremists have put out. They must be made to realize that genocide does not enjoy impunity, that aggression and occupation have consequences. The leaders of the Arab and Islamic countries have advocated a series of consequences, from stopping arms supplies, terminating trade, and reviewing Israel's UN membership. All of these deserve serious consideration by the United Nations and the international community. At the same time, we need to take decisive steps to realize the two-state solution, which offers the only and globally accepted path towards durable peace and security in the Middle East. As part of the Arab Islamic Summit Group, Pakistan welcomes the launch of the Global Alliance for Implementation of the Two-State Solution. Through this process, and here at the United Nations, we must create political realities that would ensure the inevitability of the two-state outcome. To this end, we would urge, 1, the widest possible official recognition of the State of Palestine. This must be made universal. 2, the earliest possible admission of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. And 3, the convening of an international conference to initiate decisive steps for the establishment of a sovereign, independent, and contiguous Palestinian state within the pre-1967 borders, with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. I thank you, Mr. President.